Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ranepa, and I'm Associate Professor at the Department of Hospitality at Ranepa. It is my honor to welcome you today to our session of the Student Gaidar Forum 2020 with a topic that could not be more important or more relevant today. Our section today is called the travel and hospitality industries under the axe of the pandemic and climate change, the two things that are changing and affecting the future today. Thank you for joining us at this prestigious event. Before we start our session today, allow me to remind you of some ground rules. All speakers, please keep your cameras and microphones on throughout the whole session. Members of the audience, please keep the microphones off for the whole session. Your questions are more than welcome at any stage of the meeting. Please just put them in the chat and we will try to answer them as soon as we can. Allow me now to open this session and introduce our honorary expert, Irina Bossart, Managing Director at Impulse Hospitality, Sales and Marketing Expert for Hospitality, Business Coach, and former Vice President and Interstate Hotels and Resorts, Moscow. Welcome, Irina.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be part of this extremely interesting event. Thank you.
It is an honor to have you here. We are joined here today by speakers from a leading hospitality school in Moscow, Ranepa Department of Hospitality. Our speakers will raise some very deep questions today, such as, in what ways is the hospitality industry vulnerable? How is the industry grappling with the devastating consequences of climate change and the pandemic? How are we responding and at what cost? And most importantly, what lessons have been learned from this and how does the future look like for hospitality? We will start our discussion talking about the impact of the pandemic for hospitality. For anyone around the world who travels, it is clear that the hospitality industry has been massively hit. Hotels and restaurants have been closed down for the better part of 2020. People have not been able to travel. I would like to now give the floor to Irina Bossart, our expert in business consulting, CEO and founder of Impulse Hospitality. And Irina, how has this year been for you? What kinds of problems have you come across working with clients from hospitality?
As you can imagine, the last year was extremely difficult for the hotel industry. Later on, I will show some figures, concrete figures, how exactly the hospitality industry was affected by this drastic crisis. But at the moment, I would like to say that we have never seen something like this before. I'm actively out of the hotel industry, and now I'm advising my clients on how to deal with this crisis. And last year we have seen closures of the hotel, we have seen cost reductions, we have seen reductions in teams because the hotels couldn't support the employees with such low occupancy levels and revenues. But like the topic of our joint discussion is, we have to learn something that could move us ahead. We have to invent new ways of moving forward. We have to have new ideas, new technology that helps us to become better, stronger, and more developed. That's in a nutshell what I wanted to say at the beginning of our session.
Thank you for this inspiring introduction.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are joined here today by Natalia Garkushina and Anna Kanivetskaya, our second-year students at the Department of Hospitality. They are currently pursuing their internship at two leading hotels in Moscow, Lotte Hotel Moscow and Swiss Hotel Moscow. How bad has the pandemic crisis been for these hotels? Could you tell us a little bit about the state of affairs?
Well, the global hospitality industry has suffered hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Hayden, in line with restaurants and airlines, leisure facilities are in top 5 most affected, just because many hotels have closed for the first time in decades. And moreover, their revenue from room sales and retail sales declined sharply by 2020. By March 2020, the losses of hotels in Moscow even amounted to 210 millions per day.
And the maximum capacity of hotels during the self-isolation period was 30%. And therefore, hotel companies, have embarked on figuring out how to operate in the new pandemic reality. And nowadays, the industry is only taking its first steps in a way of recovery. And only those hotels that were able to adapt during the pandemic are going to survive.
Thank you for this introduction to our section. Irina, do we have any questions at this point?
Did you notice if the decline in occupancy and revenue levels were confined only to Russia, or it happened on the international level?
Of course, we are more concerned about Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Here, and we are taking our internships here. But of course, the situation is similar worldwide. As far as there is almost no region that didn't suffer from the pandemic. We also can say that some countries, which are global touristic centers, continue to suffer because the tourism is the main part of the economy, and we know that many countries are still closed or something. So we can say that relatively their issues are even more serious that we have here in Russia.
And talking about Russia, analytics are saying that two capitals suffered the consequences of this crisis the most. Why do you think that happened?
Well, in my opinion, there are several reasons for it, actually. Moscow and St. Petersburg were cities with the most strict pandemic measures for the whole country, like penalties for not wearing masks, or, for example, passes for going out and driving. Secondly, many hotels lost a large audience of foreigners because of closed borders. And the final one, I guess, is that business people have found like a better solution for the conferences, for the meetings, instead of setting them up in the hotels. Now they prefer to hold them online, for instance, in Zoom or Teams. So there's no need of going to hotel for businessmen and for other people at all.
Yeah, okay. And as far as I know, Lotte Hotel showed one of the best results during this pandemic crisis. What do you think made the hotel so successful compared to competition?
Okay, let me answer this question. As far as probably most people here are concerned, I took my internship at Lotte. I can say that Lotte gave us a combination of strict rules and their ability to be flexible in implementing new facilities. And We'll speak about it a bit deeper further. Yes, what did a great job in fitting the new rules.
Thank you. So you have a presentation coming up talking about specific strategy employed at hotels later on.
Yeah, we do.
Thank you. Thank you. Hospitality industry is comprised not only of hotels, but also of restaurants and events. Our next presenter is Maxime Delas, our second-year student at the Department of Hospitality at Ranepa, who will share with us some insight on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic from the restaurant industry. Maxime, the floor is yours.
Yes, good day, thank you. Before the pandemic, restaurant business was not an industry where anyone could succeed easily. In 2020, restaurants have added another item to the list of problems, the global pandemic. The expenses that caused the most problems during that time were employee salaries and rent. The first problem was employee salaries, which still needed to be paid despite the absence of income. And restaurant owners had to choose between three options: keeping all employees, obtaining several bank loans in order to pay wages, ending up owning much more money they can never pay off. Option number two, firing all of the employees, hoping to rehire them after the quarantine. And option number three, keeping several irreplaceable employees and firing all the rest. Many businessmen decided to go with option number two. And for example, in United States, by April 2020, the unemployment rate of all the country, not only the hospitality industry, was raised by 10% since the start of the pandemic. The restaurants who decided to dismiss the majority of their staff members have faced with the following problems. Many employees have sued the restaurants that fired them, as it can be debated that firing a person on such short notice is illegal. And problem number two was that after quarantine was lifted, labor market has also suffered a major decline, which was surprising. The reason for that was the fact that people who were working in a city but lived elsewhere in the villages and other cities were afraid to start visiting Moscow again in fear of the virus. Expense number two was rent. One of the options for businessmen was negotiating with property owners, arguing that it'll be more beneficial for them to lower the price until the end of quarantine. Another example of how restaurants dealt with that problem in France, restaurant owners who did not succeed in negotiation decided to bring the problem to court. On this exact occasion, France has sided with the businessmen, as restaurants is one of the most important parts of French culture. It was also in France where government has provided generous monetary support to all kinds of businesses, not only hospitality. They were granted 75% coverage of all the salaries, employee salaries. And to make the matters even better, most workers have stated that they're happy just receiving 75% without additional 25 to keep the business alive. Moving to one of the successful strategies that restaurants have carried out in order to maintain at least a portion of cash flow was corporate catering, and most importantly, providing food for the hospitals. Doctors and patients alike obviously need to be fed as they stay in hospital, and the latter, the patients, was the most important factor to decide in deciding to outsource the food, because hospitals' canteens were not able to provide for this many people when the hospitals were overflown. In conclusion, Russian restaurants in 2020 and 2021 had the following objectives: keeping the restaurant alive and finding the workers for unoccupied positions. In period where restaurants' usual clientele is unable to visit it, one of the effective strategies is becoming an outsourcer for corporate catering or supplying hospitals. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. And I would like to welcome questions, these presentations from Irina Bothard.
Maxim, which options in terms of staff retention were the most beneficial from your point of view?
From my point of view, as it is obviously not a very good idea to obtain so many bank loans in order to keep all the staff, the restaurant will go bankrupt eventually. And option number 2 was, as I said, surprising one, because restaurant owners, after the lift of the quarantine, were expecting, wow, look at that, most of my competitors are gone, the labor market must be full of people looking for jobs. But again, it was basically empty. The gastarbeiters were imported back to their countries, no cheap labor force. So in my opinion, the most successful strategy was number 3, keeping 15% of your employees, which are absolutely irreplaceable, still paying them their wages. And after the quarantine lifted, finding people for the unoccupied positions. So option number 3.
Okay. And you mentioned also one of the strategy was to renegotiate the rent for the restaurant. Yeah. And did you notice any best practices in this? Or what did the majority restaurants do in this regard, in Moscow, for example?
In Moscow, I would say that it really depends on the landlord. Because some people cannot be negotiated with. They're absolutely sure that if you cannot afford to pay all the rent, leave. I will immediately find someone else to replace you. And if the person is can think logically, he doesn't understand that he won't be able to find a person right now during quarantine to fill in that unoccupied space. So I would say that people who can be persuaded, just using logic, saying that I will pay you half the rent right now, and maybe I will even repay you for this time after the quarantine. So basically giving them more time, not giving them a discount, but giving them more time to pay the rent. Yeah, to repay.
Okay. Even those restaurants who used your favorite option, number 3, keeping the essential for business employees, they couldn't generate enough revenue to cover the costs. Yeah.
Yes.
Did you notice any revenue generating initiatives that restaurants use to be able to cover their costs and
of course,
to move forward?
Yes, of course. My colleague will be talking about the obvious, I guess, decision is going full delivery.
Okay.
But my colleague will cover this subject.
Okay, so delivery was one of the
delivery
options.
And either catering or outsourcing for governmental institutions like ministries, not private hospitals, or even private hospitals which are still working. I still believe this is one of the best options.
The reason I asked this question is I heard some of the restaurants in US even offered the option to their loyal clientele of shopping with them, because people couldn't go to the shops, so they were delivering not only food but also like not only dishes but also food products.
Oh, interesting. Like ingredients and like Perikrovstok and Azbuka Vkusa is doing right now in Russia.
Exactly.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So that
I did not know that.
Okay.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this very interesting information. Now, there have been a lot of quotes flooding the internet, such as, any kind of crisis can be good. It wakes you up. Something good comes out of every crisis. Did any good actually come out of the pandemic crisis? The floor goes to Ranepa, our second-year hospitality student here at Ranepa, who will share with us some emerging trends in the hospitality industry.
Today I'm going to tell you about the restaurant industry on the way to recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic. It goes without saying that problems caused by the COVID-19 pandemic required solutions, and the first was an urgent need of compliance with new hygienic and safety rules. Many people were not ready to visit the establishments even after the restrictions were lifted and restaurants and bars opened. So restaurateurs had to convince guests of safety to get them back. As a consequence, the first measure taken was to revise the restaurants layout and increase the spacing between tables. Before the pandemic, the standard in restaurants in Europe was about 1.5 square meters per seat. But during the quarantine, the World Health Organization has recommended to increase it to 2.5 square meters per visitor. Restaurant owners had to agree, but with their own amendments. For example, as you can see on the slide, instead of taking the tables out of the restaurant, they placed the protective screens on the tables and took up with toys the places where guests were not allowed to sit. Furthermore, the COVID-19 pandemic made businesses rethink their attitudes and find new ways of working during the quarantine, which led to a mass expansion of delivery services. As it can be seen from a bar chart, about half of the restaurants had a delivery before the pandemic. But in March, at the height of the quarantine, some establishments also decided to launch this service. In the regions located far from Moscow, this decision was more popular. So, as you can see, the launch of delivery has become a growing trend, which helped to solve the problems caused by the lockdown. Now, let us have a look at the example of the United Kingdom. Their delivery has also become one of the fastest growing trends. One big shift in the market was in the methods of distribution. At the beginning of quarantine in February, about 80% of items were sold, but closer to April and May, their share collapsed to 31%. As consumers observed strict social distancing rules and the majority of the establishments closed. Routes that involve minimal contact, such as delivery, grew by 54%. As for the USA, there was a boom in the delivery format. As you can see on the slide, the income of the four most popular delivery services doubled and was 5.5 billion. Over the same period of 2019, companies combined 2.5 billion in revenue. Thus, it clearly shows how much the demand for delivery both in the UK and in the USA has increased. Another trend worth mentioning is the digitalization of restaurants. This measure helps to maintain sanitary standards. Instead of the normal menu, the establishments began to use electronic alternatives on the tablet, like on the tablet or in the application. For instance, in France, many restaurants opened after the quarantine started using QR codes on the tables or table display stands with QR codes. As it can be seen from the slide, more than half of the US establishments use tablets and automated programs for restaurants. You can observe that QR codes also are used in India and in the Arab Emirates. Almost half of the restaurants in these countries have completely switched to using QR codes instead of the regular paper menus. In conclusion, I would like to say that these measures helped to convince guests of the safety of visiting the establishments. Sure enough, demonstrative sanitation practices attract new guests and allow restaurateurs to avoid global crisis leading to closure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for this very in-depth presentation and for your research. And now some questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Actually, I wanted to add about Holland, but I saw that slide on your presentation. In Holland last year, exactly in May, they were using those greenhouses as an option to go to restaurant. Yeah, that was extremely very interesting. I know this YouTube video was viral last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. The question on delivery, you have mentioned that we saw the tendency for restaurants to offer additional delivery services was obvious before the crisis. Do you think this tendency will remain and survive in the future? Is it going to stay profitable, or will it just die out?
I think that delivery services are still profitable now, and they will develop because it is like an additional profit for each restaurant. I think it will only develop as statistics shows that a significant number of people are used to delivery. For many, it became the best convenient solution.
In the world, for example, in the States, there's a tendency of restaurants cooperating with delivery companies like Uber. For example, do you see same tendencies in Russia?
Yeah, Delivery Club and Yandex Food, as I understood my question right.
Okay. QR codes, you mentioned also one of the ways that restaurants use to deal with as a measure to create contactless environment. But it's also sort of contributes to being green and use create paperless environment. What other environmentally friendly initiatives did you notice during this pandemic times?
Nowadays, it is a trend. So it's not only the environmental benefit, but also business benefit for the restaurants. That is why I think a significant number of restaurants are trying to become eco-friendly and green. There are many quick and and easy ways that your business can reduce its impact on the earth. But I want to list the most basic and important. As for me, it includes the reducing water usage by using low flow spray valves, which allow you to use less water when washing dishes, for example. Also using the eco-friendly disposables utensils and dinnerware, like an alternatives to traditional plastic. Also minimize food waste, carefully manage your inventory, and choose eco-friendly cleaning products. Chemicals which have the same cleaning power but without the harsh elements.
You also mentioned that the distance between tables have changed because of the new rules. It means that the seating capacity of the restaurants have drastically decreased. What restaurants could do to still be profitable and sort of safe and attractive for people at the same time?
As they reduce the number of seats inside, they need to develop an external customer base. It means that restaurateurs should work on the development of the delivery service, for example, offer various promotions, and thus increase the turnover of online sales. I think it is the only way to stay profitable in such conditions. Maybe also to create some merch. For example, restaurant Chasti in Moscow and St. Petersburg, they have their own merch. For example, cups, bags, or T-shirts, and it also helps them to stay profitable.
So some merchandising as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation.
Thank you. We have a very interesting discussion unfolding. This discussion has shown so far that every cloud has a silver lining, and that the crisis can boost technological development in the industry. Now, are there any other emerging technologies in the restaurant industry that are aimed to embrace the new reality post-COVID? I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Andrew Karpenko, who will talk about some insights into interesting technologies at restaurants that you may not have known about before.
So, the 21st century, of the century of technological progress. Every year, more and more new technologies are implemented in different industries. Smart gadgets that control and collaboration in residential space, electric cars that do not require a driver, or 5G internet. This technological fever could not bypass the restaurant sphere, obviously. So let's take a look at some best examples. Nowadays, a lot of entrepreneurs are forced to digitize some of the business process. For me, the best example is that waiters could use tablets or mobile phones with special apps to take orders. This technology optimizes two things. So first of all, those apps could be connected to the whole management system of the restaurant. Every order will be immediately directed to the POS system, and chefs can start preparing their dishes right away. That could decrease waiting time of order for 40 minutes just by using a handheld device to take orders, which will positively affect their revenues since the guest turnover will increase. And second reason is that all information about the order, including the guest preferences and feedback, will be stored on the application's databases. This feature will allow restaurants to better analyze their regular guests and provide more personal service, as well as attract new ones. Another interesting tech is a delivery robot. So it started firstly when Estonian company Starships Technologies in 2016 launched a food delivery service in the UK and USA, consisting entirely of robotic couriers. So how it works? When robot receive an order, the device independently drives up to the loading point. The cargo is placed in special storage, and the robot courier moves to its destination. The technology has proved so successfully that major companies such as Amazon, Google, Uber have begun developing their own delivery drones. And our Russian company Yandex already presented their delivery drone called Yandex Rover. You can see it on the right side of the screen. Although the technology looks very promising, it will have to go many modifications before it can replace human labor due to the fact that they got some problems with adaptability to the city environment. And at the end, I'd like to take a look at some eco technology. So, majority of experts forecast that in 2015, humanity will have to produce 70% more meat than now, which is not feasible with our technologies. However, there is a rational way out. Many scientists are working on creating laboratory-grown meat, which will be a reasonable substitution for the present one. For restaurants, such meat brings huge benefits. First, in the near future, it will become much cheaper than grown in the classic way, since the production doesn't require a huge amount of fat for livestock. Uh, and the second, artificial meat will be consumed, for example, by ideological vegetarians, which will expand the target audience, for instance, for meat restaurants. The technology itself will attract guests to come to restaurants where artificial meat will be served. Technologies helps the restaurant business to develop in all directions, whether it's reducing the cost of the dishes or optimizing business processes. And we believe that in the future, we will see even more interesting integrations of modern technologies in the restaurant field. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mhm.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing such exciting technologies. I'm sure that many of the people here have not come across such technologies yet, or do not know much about them.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think we have some questions.
Andrew, I've never actually even seen so far the delivery by robots, but I did hear about the idea of using drones, and you mentioned that one of the drawbacks of using delivery robots is adaptability to streets. This is your personal opinion. I would like to ask you, what do you think would come to the consumer faster, drone delivery or robot delivery like you showed?
Nowadays, it will be definitely human because they're faster and they're easily adapting to the weather condition.
Okay.
Yeah, but in the future, I think that drones will be faster because they can fly, for example, in the future, something like this.
Okay.
But moreover, like biggest disadvantage of drones could be that they will be hacked, and this could lead to the leakage of the user data, for example, or just simple theft of orders. If we're speaking about the future. But still, the main problem nowadays is their adaptability to the city environment, as I said before.
Okay. You mentioned that there are some benefits to using robots, but do you see any kinds of downsides of using robots in the restaurant industry, not only for delivery?
So it will replace somehow the human labor, and there will be like problems for workers because the delivery occupancy will be kind of closed.
So loss of jobs.
Loss of jobs,
humans.
Yeah.
Okay. An interesting topic you raised with artificial meat, animal-derived meat.
Yeah.
Actually, I had several discussions with my friends, and we didn't come to the joint conclusion whether it's a good thing or not so good thing. For meat lovers, artificial meat is not such a big option. Do you think at some point we will stop eating real meat, or how do you see this tendency developing?
Yeah, this question is very controversial, but I think that it will have to be replaced since demand in the future will be too high to fed everybody with meat. And this meat itself is not very different from the naturally grown. It's a bit softer because it's not grown on the bones and muscles, but the taste is same.
Okay. Have you tried?
Yep, sure. I've been to US like 3 years ago. I tried it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you give up naturally grown meat to artificially grown meat?
Not in this century.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your input.
Thank you for your attention. Bye.
Thank you. Very interesting trends. We'll be living in an interesting century, it looks like. At the beginning of our discussion, Natalie and Anna have already spoken about the devastating impact of the pandemic on the hospitality industry. Are the responses within the hotel industry similar to the responses in the restaurant industry? The floor is yours.
Okay, so we can say that in many points, the answer is quite similar. So we can see some similar trends connected to hotels and restaurants, but of course they can't be absolutely the same as far as the industries are a bit different. And the first thing to discuss here is shifting of guest priorities. People start to pay more attention to their own health security. They reduce the number of personal interactions. They choose accommodation more carefully. They expect hotels to take all proper measures to keep guests safe. And therefore, the task for hotels is now to ensure guests in their health safety using different technologies and implementing new standards of service. And the hotels which survive nowadays are those who change their operation strategies and feed the new rules most. They all have new standards of disinfection. They have demands for wearing masks and gloves and keeping the social distance. So the new priority now is not only to provide the personal service to the guests, but to make it secure for everyone, not only to guests, but also to employees. And for instance, Lotte Hotel Moscow employees disinfect all the surfaces every 2 hours. They wear masks and gloves and change them every 2 or 3 hours. And in the back office, you can see the list with the rules of hands cleaning, with the rules. Sorry? Okay, I believe it's a glitch. So yes, in the back office, you can see the lists with the rules of hands cleaning, with the rules of interactions among staff, and rules of guest contacts. Sanitizers are everywhere and actively used by everyone. And what is more, all things that are difficult to disinfect are removed from the hotel rooms. For example, before the pandemic, there was a book symbol of Lotse in every room. It is called The Sorrows of Young Werther. And now all these books are waiting to come back to their places when the pandemic finishes. And it will be safe for all guests.
I was doing my internship in Swiss Hotel Moscow, and I can definitely say that the measures are very similar to ones that Natalie mentioned, but there are some measures that have changed even the operating process of the Swiss service. There are, of course, apparent visible moments such as air disinfection, but they are also almost invisible for guests. For instance, for Swiss service staff, now it is obligatory to use dry cleaning for the uniform for twice a week. And speaking about the measures that have affected the whole procedure of hotel services, it is essential to mention that all external food deliveries were carried out only personally to the guest. So now concierge service, for concierge service, it is forbidden to take it because hotels are trying to minimize the risk of pandemic infection. So couriers are not allowed to move around the hotel and of course to deliver food to the room. Apart from that, Swiss Hotel Moscow changed the health and care sphere. For instance, during the pandemic, access to the spa was only possible by appointment. So the total number of guests in the spa zone was only up to 10 people.
And to keep guests secure, hotels are being more attentive to their employees, of course. And those who have even slight symptoms of any disease are not allowed to get to their work to not to give a risk for anyone. And some hotels even oblige their employees to pass COVID-19 tests every month. And this prevents not only COVID to spread, but also other illnesses too. As an example, being a trainee at Lotse, I had to measure my temperature entering the hotel every day. And I also had to sign 2 papers proving that I'm healthy and can work without any risks for other employees and guests.
And according to the tendency of keeping guests safe, new hotel trends have appeared. Such trends nowadays are called health security trends, and the main feature of them is to minimize any risk during the traveling. For instance, hotel experts noticed the increase in use of robots. And nowadays, robots are used for different purposes. In concierge roles, they also can carry luggage or even assist with cooking food. Moreover, robots are used for housekeeping purposes, and the main feature of them is to reduce customer to staff interaction. For instance, the Westin Hotel uses the light straight killing germ robot, and his main aim is to sanitize and disinfect rooms. According to hotel experts, this robot can provide an extra layer of protection for guests, as it can disinfect every spot where a virus can be. Moreover, there are technologies the significance of which has increased against the backdrop of COVID-19, and such technology is contactless payment. Well, the main benefit of it is the limitation of the surfaces that guests need to touch. And it only not only helps to keep guests safe, but only help to keep safe the employees. So I can say that contactless payments can provide guests with a great level of convenience, as it also can speed up the payment process. And actually, COVID-19, I guess, greatly stimulated this technology to spread, because according to the sources such as NFA Analytical Center, over the past 2 years, the share of people who know about this possibility of contactless payment increased from the 84% to 91%. And of course, in Russia, smartphones have become used for 3 times more often. So Russians are getting used to the contactless payments and using smart systems as well as the whole world.
And additionally, we can say that for many people, a hotel became a place for self-isolation. These people claim the opportunity to stay alone in their room, with an option to even order food without any contact with other people, to be the best options to be safe during the pandemic. And there is an Airbnb survey, and according to it, 54% of long-term bookings were factored by COVID. So people say that the opportunity to stay at a hotel enabled them to escape their daily routines, to be closer to their loved ones, to the nature, to outdoor activities, and they could even enjoy the access to different amenities like a pool or a gym. So many hotels implemented even special types of accommodation for such people who have a demand for an extra level of safety. And for instance, Lotte Hotel Moscow again now has adjoining rooms, one of which can be used as a dining room or a living area.
So to conclude, it is essential to say that this crisis did not signify that the hotel and hospitality industry is going to die. Nowadays, the epidemic recedes and hotels gradually recover. So it is essential to pay attention to 3 main points for hotels to survive. Firstly, it is essential to take proper health security measures and pay attention to it to help hotels to stay agile and flexible. So the flexibility is the second point hotels have to pay attention. And the final one is that hotels should focus on the implementing of technologies. Though the hotel industry has become one of the most vulnerable areas for the negative consequences of the pandemic, still with proper management and paying attention to the most important points of recovery, hotels may not only provide the facilities spread before the crisis, but also invent new ones that would be profitable and support the hotel as a unique brand with unique products.
So thank you for your attention. We are ready to answer your questions.
Thank you. Yeah, after this presentation, I believe anyone who had any doubts and any reservations about going to a hotel, any fears, now these fears are gone. We're all going to travel. We're all going to hotels. We have some questions to our presenters.
Yeah, I like the presentation. You covered really the essential things that hotels are and were doing to stay afloat. But to your, if I can, I would like to make a suggestion to your list of 3 things. There's one more thing which I think is extremely important, because implementation of new technology implementation of new measures which are required by sanitary new rules. It all costs money, and one of the most essential things that hotels have to do to survive is to keep in balance the revenue and costs. This is something that I would add to your presentation as a sort of recipe for survival. What did you notice any other new technologies that hotels are using apart from what you mentioned? And you mentioned use of robots, contactless payments. Yeah, any new things that came up recently? Maybe it's not used in Moscow hotels, but worldwide. Did you know? Did you notice anything?
For sure, there are plenty of technologies which are implemented nowadays. As I worked as an employee of a club lounge, which is a business floor where people to work, actually, to have business meetings, I can say that especially there, all the meeting rooms are now equipped with streaming equipment, so that there is no probably need to have a huge meeting with a lot of people. So just those who are presenting could be there, and those who are there only to listen can do it from their homes. As guys mentioned about restaurants, all menus are also provided via QR codes. So no need to touch any paper anymore. You can do it using your mobile phone. What else?
I'd like to add that if we speak about the best practices and the most common of them, I'd like to add that many hotels started to develop their digital space. So they are optimizing their websites, and many of them offer guests to join, for instance, their online yoga classes with hotel yoga expert. Moreover, the Alluvian Hotel, if I'm not mistaken, it is the hotel in Mississippi, even hold a class with their executive chef, where participants were able to cook a delicious dish themselves, of course, but under the guidance of the famous chef. And these practices are and were spreading, of course, during the pandemic, and I can even tell you that they help to develop hotels in some ways, like marketing strategies.
Exactly. Very interesting comment. I know that not only American hotels used this opportunity to communicate digitally with loyal guests. Some Russian hotels did the same. One hotel in Yekaterinburg during quarantine, for example, was offering a new service to their loyal clients who had to stay at home and were reading fairy tales to the kids. So it was quite an interesting thing. And cooking classes, I also heard about this. To add to the technologies, to my previous questions, as far as I know, both Hilton and Marriott offer not only contactless payments, but also electronic key. Whenever people register at the front desk, they can load information to their key and use the mobile phone as the key to the room number. And I noticed also a lot of chains, because it's also quite an expensive exercise, develop their own applications. So it means that like QR code for the restaurant, where you can see the menu of the restaurant with the application of the hotel or the hotel brand. You can see all the services that are available in the hotel and use this app to communicate with concierge, etc., etc. Yeah. So it's quite an interesting development in the hotel industry. You mentioned that people were using long stays as a sort of way to self-isolation, not to affect family and members whenever they came from travel or just felt sick. Did you notice any other initiatives with long stays that were used on the Moscow market, or just self-isolation?
I can tell you about the Swiss Hotel Moscow. I knew a couple of guests that were staying at our hotel for 4 months or even more, I guess. And I think that this tendency like have a lot of upsides, but still a lot of downsides.
Okay.
And speaking about upsides, of course, it's essential to mention that like staying in the hotel, everything is done for you. You don't even need to do anything. No need to go shopping. No need to meet everyone if you don't want to. And hotel staff do all possible and impossible just to make sure that the service provided by hotel meets your expectations. Of course, you can also be sure that the surface and everything that surrounds you are disinfected using professional cleaners. And this disinfection might be even better than the home one. But still, in my opinion, the main downside is that you still have to interact with people. So sitting at home, you only have you and no one. Of course, you can order food delivery and every other service, but still, there are a lot of people at the hotel, staff, other guests, and the question of security is still a bit doubtful, I guess. And it is the main downside, in my opinion.
Okay. I can give you an example of another long-term arrangement that was especially popular in, for example, some of the European countries, especially in Germany. A lot of people were extremely tired of home office, where you get a lot of interruptions with kids, etc., and people could not concentrate on their job. So hotels in Germany, a lot of hotels in Germany, for example, were offering packages of renting not room, but room as an office. Yeah, so they packaged certain things that are essential to stay productive, like including internet, including coffee delivery, etc., so that people could just rent a room, work, and go home. Did you notice any kind of initiatives like this in Russian market?
For sure, yes. Some hotels provide room service, and I actually heard some stories at Lotsa. When the employees of room service said that their orders were somehow factored by guests' wants, guests' needs to have some food from the restaurant. So they were tired of home food and they came to the hotel because it was the only opportunity to feel the atmosphere of the ambience of something except of their home cooking and even deliveries to home.
Okay. Interesting. What do you think other practices, best practices, helped, for example, your hotels, Swiss Hotel and Lotte Hotels, survive during this pandemic, other than what you mentioned already?
I can't actually just mark the one best practice that helped. I guess it is mostly a combination of everything that we've mentioned and everything that can be used in hotels. It is smart techniques, concepts, just contactless payment, chatbots, robots, and everything that can provide the great level of first personalization and secondly guest safety. I guess that's the main point.
And when I would like to ask last question on this topic, do you think robots will be used in hotel industry extensively?
We can say that they would never become as important as people are there. Of course, this technology would spread because it's convenient in some points, and some guests are amazed by such opportunity. But still, personal service is still more about people. So it will spread extensively, of course, but not that extensively as it spreads during the pandemic. So it would somehow slower.
Thank you very much for this answer. I also hope that people-to-people contacts, even with the use of technologies, will become more and more important. That's my point of view.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for extremely interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See some comments coming in. Some people are, Anastasia says that many hotels have provided accommodation and food for doctors working in COVID hospitals in order to reduce their contacts with their family. So there's a lot of this goodwill going on with the pandemic. Similar thing to what we've heard already with restaurants, helping hospitals, providing these services.
It's a very mutually beneficial thing.
Let us now move beyond hotels and restaurants and turn our attention to the events industry. With public gatherings banned across the globe for the better part of 2020, it is clear that the events industry has taken a massive hit. Our second-year student of hospitality, Elena Shklaeva, will now tell us about how the events industry is managing to stay afloat in these difficult times.
The event industry, like the other part of hospitality, was greatly affected by the pandemic. At the beginning of the spread of the COVID, event organizers faced with special requirements and recommendations developed World Health Organization and local authorities. For instance, Moscow government obliged the companies to follow rules of Rospotrebnadzor. You can see them on the slide. According to the bar chart, 14% of responders admitted that they didn't apply any special measures, but the majority of organizers followed the requirements to protect their attendees and their staff. Adapting to a new reality, organizers offered new ways to hold events and connect people located in different places. So online events became popular. Although this format was held before, the use of modern technologies and special features such as live streams, webcasting, and virtual platforms give organizers new opportunities to make the events full-fledged. Obviously, event managers began to use existing platforms, for example, Zoom, that initially provided video chats for small and medium-sized conferences and meetings. Well, this application also has been used for celebrations, corporative ceremonies, and other informal events during the pandemic. That made it a popular application with 300 million daily active users. And if you look at the graph, you will see that the usage of it increased by 677% between February and June. Furthermore, there was a steady rise in number of startups and new software for holding events. So many companies intended to invest in web conferencing software. The main reason of that to immerse participants in the event by using special interactive functions such as chats and masterclasses in one place. One more trend to look at is combination of traditional and online events with hybrid events. Actually, they existed before COVID too, and were a useful solution for participants who can't attend in person. However, during the pandemic, priority of virtual aspects has become more relevant. So thanks to them, organizers can achieve high levels of engagement and create valuable networking opportunities that are only possible face-to-face interactions. A good example of modern platform that were existent during the pandemic, this platform used for virtual events that turned from startup into a company valued at $2 billion. According to the report of Event Extra, 85% of event organizers in Asia will transition their events into a hybrid model after the pandemic, and only 7% are going to return to the physical one without using online part. The statistic confirms the fact that the hybrid format brings numerous benefits to event managers who will no longer be limited by size of the venue and can expect their audience to include virtual attendees as well who will prefer to attend in person. In conclusion, I'd like to say that the event industry suffered major changes and still changing, developing on the situation. Due to opportunity to hold events in virtual and hybrid formats, the companies were able to avoid bankruptcy and recover more quickly. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to answer your question.
Thank you, Elena, for these insights on the events industry. So now we know a little bit about what's going on in events. And I believe we have some questions coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yelena, you mentioned that you showed some needs statistics and mentioned that 14% of the hotels didn't comply. Were there any measures for non-compliance against the hotels?
Yes, and as we talk about some measures, these organizers note about that they will have punitive measures from a government. And punitive measures in Russia included fines from 100 rubles to 1 million rubles. Also suspension of any activities and even imprisonment. These measures depending on the harm that can cause to participants of the event. So any any case unique, and as I know that some organizers have these punitive measures for non-compliance.
So to avoid unnecessary costs in fines, it's better to follow the the rules. Hybrid events for the event industry has been a tendency for the last, I would say, 10 years. And especially in the States and in Asian market. But for the hotels to be able to do such events is extremely cost. They have to invest a lot of money into internet capabilities, into streaming capabilities, etc., etc. And of course, the newer hotels are built already with those equipment, and they can do such events. But if you look at the hotel industry in Russia, for example, there are a lot of older hotels which do not have the capability. How do you see the future of these hotels if we talk about cooperation with the meeting and events industry?
It's the interesting question. I think that the solution can be to work with some modern events agency that can offer them to access their facilities like adherent cameras and to provide and hold events on this place. So I'm not. I'm sure that these old hotels should changing because modern world, modern technologies is changing too. So they should adapt into new reality and to use their facilities and offer for and collaborate with event agencies.
So actually, you're saying that it's a must for hotel industry to change to comply with the new requirements. Then my next question is, do you think the hybrid events or virtual events take over the offline events from meeting industry?
I think that hybrid events will be widespread due to their advantages, because event planners can offer and are no longer beyond by physical and or geographical limits, and can hold mass gatherings in, and maybe they can unite anyone in the who could potentially participate in this event. So it is very very relevant format for new reality.
But how will it be developed? Will offline events still be held?
I think that when we choosing between traditional format offline and online events, it would be a combination of it, and event organizers should be choose what they want to do, what the purpose is of the event, and can choose what format they can choose a lot. But It is a difficult question, and I think that it is that event industry waiting for new interesting experience for both organizers and participants.
It's really a very interesting question because there are, I mean, we cannot answer this question, but I do know that there was a study, pre-COVID study of impact of virtual and hybrid events on the meeting industry. And meeting planners came to the conclusion that with the introduction of hybrid events, they actually increased the participation in offline events, because they could offer the participation to a bigger audience. And for example, if some attendee of the conference couldn't attend the conference this year, but participated in the conference offline, then next year this participant, if he liked or she liked the conference, would join the offline conference. So it's actually didn't decrease the number of participants, but also increased the revenue and number of participants for meeting industry. It's quite an interesting study there was. I don't know how it will be, how it will develop after the COVID times, but yeah, it was interesting. And one more point I wanted to make on this presentation is in CEO magazine, which is US edition, there was an interview with Zoom owner who benefited from the self-isolation immensely. Like you showed, the increase in usage of Zoom was, as far as I remember, 677% up, yeah, compared to previous year. And the Zoom owner was interviewed also. He was asked a question, how do you see the future? Will Zoom take over the meeting industry? And he said, absolutely not. Zoom will not kill the events and meeting industry. As soon as the travel restrictions are off, then people would like to meet offline, definitely. So you can be rest assured that it's not a competition. They will be, like you said, most likely complementing each other and increasing the number of participants in events, and industry will grow. That's
I would like to add that I saw that the Zoom would like to launch their new platform for events, Zoom On, where they combine the hybrid events and virtual facilities, and on this platform organizers can hold trade shows, master classes, and other different events. So it is a really popular format.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elena.
Thank you for this very interesting discussion and your valuable input into our talk today. While the pandemic was a plague that hit suddenly and out of nowhere, another global threat has been around for quite a long time, and it was threatening not only the hospitality industry, but humanity as a whole. And this threat is climate change. According to recent legislation and worldwide initiatives, the hospitality industry is obliged to adopt solutions to help fight climate change. Please welcome Ulyana Masisheva and Alexander Barata, who will share with us some of the best green practices in hospitality today. Alexander and Ulyana, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. What you see on the screen on the next slide is the so-called donut model of economics. And it usually serves as a framework for sustainable development of the humanity. And it has a social foundation, which is basically the social problems that we need to solve currently, and the so-called ecological ceiling, which is the top limit for us in the process of salvation of our problems. And the main thing for us is to stay within the light green circle without crossing the limit of the ecology. And if you look at the same model today, you will see that we are not doing really well. And this means that something needs to be changed. In the middle of the 20th century, the ecological movement discovered that the industrial revolution of the 18th, 19th century has a significant impact on the planet, and that in terms of ecology, we most likely have lost more than actually obtained during the revolution. And the material benefits also involved some environmental costs. And by the end of the century, the global community has become highly dependent on the non-renewable sources of energy. And the ecological footprint has surpassed the potential capabilities of Earth. And this is the time when the scientists first began to mention sustainability as one of the key means of avoiding disaster. And the concept of sustainability focuses on fulfilling our current needs without endangering the future generations and without limiting their ability to meet their own needs. And sustainability includes three main aspects: that's environment, economy, and society. And sustainability itself lies somewhere in the middle of these three spheres of our life. And the main idea of sustainability is to find some innovative solutions for humanity and nature to coexist efficiently. And of course, this trend has become really popular in recent years, and it has affected many of the spheres of our life, including the service sector, of course, and the restaurant business is one of the most noticeable parts of the service sector. And well, it is believed that restaurant business is now one of the most wasteful in the sector, and the entrepreneurs had to adapt to the trend for sustainability. And the first ever restaurant to win the Sustainable Restaurant Award in 2013 was the restaurant Narisawa in Tokyo, Japan. And it features French cooking techniques with the sustainable Japanese ingredients. And the main objective for its chef, Yoshihiro Narisawa, was to lead the nature and humanity to coexist in a symbiotic relationship. So they implemented several practices to become more sustainable, such as making crockery from fallen leaves and wood. And they get all of the ingredients from the local farmers, including the fish. And they offer seasonal menus in order to use the products and not to keep them for too long. And they also buy the same amount of products that they're about to use within the year. And all of these practices aim on making the restaurant operation as transparent as possible. And of course, the Russian economy, well, later, but still catch the trend for sustainability. And Alexander is about to tell us about some Russian experience in this field.
Yeah, there are great examples of providing sustainability practices in Russian restaurant industry too. Harvest is considered to be the first Russian ecological restaurant due to the number of practices which have been adopted from the West. For instance, they minimize using plastic food package and avoiding food waste. Actually, food waste or food loss and subsequent transformation into waste-free production is one of the crucial steps to make business thriving. This problem received a wide response after the release of the documentary film Theater of Life, where chefs preparing fine dining dishes from the leftovers from Milan Expo At the same time, not in the movie, but in real life, Metropole Restaurant provides a considerable number of solutions for this problem, and every single product is used to its maximum. The bread pudding and bread crumbs for chicken schnitzel are prepared from the stale bread leftovers. Intact meat dishes in proper condition become a basis for multi-component salads and appetizers. That are just two examples from enormous number of food waste practices in Metropole Restaurant. Among numerous practices for making an establishment more sustainable and eco-friendly, one is very important: creativity. A restaurant will be able to receive stable income if entrepreneur is creative enough to find innovative or even revolutionary solutions for the appearing challenges and trends, which are dictated by competitors and even customers. To sum it all up, it is necessary to state that the rapid development of technologies is very controversial. Humanity has already approached the awareness of the consequences of this development. Restaurants, as a part of the worldwide economy, are of a considerable impact on the current state of the environment. That is the main reason why implementing the sustainability tools to the Russian economy is a first priority for the upcoming years. It is the best time to make the first and confident practical steps towards sustainability.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Shall I ask the questions already?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
we're ready.
I'm almost ready for the
Uliana
questions.
and Alexander, you mentioned some sustainable practice and the importance of them, but from Maxim's presentation, we already know that restaurant business is extremely low margin, low profitable business. Yeah. So how can restaurants stay sustainable and profitable? What do you think the solution could be?
Doubtless, sustainability era in restaurant has to match with worldwide green policy. I'll try to describe what I mean. Greening all spheres of the world has to become global trend. So there is essential to set up strong connection with restaurant business and government. Implementation of sustainability technologies should be encouraged by leadership of the country. It stands for special conditions of taxation with reduced payouts for commercial activity, lowered loan rate, additional subsidy from federal budget. Exactly federal, because implementation of sustainable technologies must be a massive tendency, but not rarely exceptions.
So you think the solution actually lies within the government? I heard about like in Europe, there are a lot of productions if they're using sustainable energy, being compensated by the government. Even agriculture, if they're using some green trends, compensated by the governments. Do you think this practice should be sort of taken further to do some compensations to restaurants and hotels?
Yeah, I think in that way. I'm thinking in that way, but because we have already have some sustainable examples, not in hospitality industry, but for example, owners of electric cars doesn't have to pay tax for using parking in Moscow. It's just one example from another sphere, but I think we're on the way to be sustainable, but of course we have a big room for improvement.
I also noticed, for example, the tendency actually of priorities and preferences of consumer changing a little bit. More and more people are going for sort of healthy and means like reasonable or responsible consumption, for example, more and more people going vegetarian, vegan, based on not only healthy principles but also by choice, by saying that it's more green, etc. Do you see any this trend developing also in Russian in Russia?
Yeah, I think vegetarianism is very popular in Russia now. It's a trend which really expands rapidly, and we see that a lot of restaurants are set up now. Avocado Queen, Zabava, Kodo, you know these restaurants in. These restaurants which are aimed on vegetarian menus, and I think today much more restaurants are vegetarian than 10 years ago, for example.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add about the green consumption. There are, well, for example, there is a chain called Burger Heroes in Moscow, and they offer complimentary water, filtrated water, instead of selling their water in plastic bottles. And well, the people are actually they like the idea, they like the this trend very much, and also in this chain, if you bring your own bottle, you will get some more cash back later, and this is another means that can encourage guests to become more eco-friendly. And also, there are no plastic cards in many of the restaurants anymore for some loyalty programs, and you can use your personal account with your mobile number. And these are the technologies that are not only useful for the planet, they're also very convenient for us, because today we have like a ton of these plastic cards from different places, and if you can come to the restaurant and have some discount with only using your mobile number, I think this is the opportunity that, well, it is convenient for us, not only for the ecology, and this is one of the main things that makes it so popular.
Interesting. I'm extremely hopeful that we together will change this trend of food waste and using a lot of plastic. I was for the second year I was the member of jury of Russian Hospitality Awards, and part of these awards, I mean one of the section that all hotels and restaurants participating in this award had to talk about is sustainability. And it was amazing how many interesting ideas hotels come up with from using local farmers' food, so that to decrease the transportation costs, from utilization of oil, from frying, etc., etc. So I'm extremely hopeful that all these best practices will be distributed to the whole hotel industry, not only in Russia, worldwide.
Yeah, and aside from hotels, many restaurants use such innovative technologies too, like Charlie restaurant in St. Petersburg. They also use the oil from the French fries. They transport it to Europe, and it becomes actually fuel for tractors and stuff. And these really are the means that, well, a customer wouldn't even imagine of. And this creativity, like the problems are not only limiting us, they're also giving us the field for our creative solutions. And I think that's wonderful.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Hopeful for the future. Thank you very much for your talk. It was really interesting. Very in-depth analysis of these topics today. I would like to remind our attendees that your questions and comments are more than welcome in the chat box So feel free to type your questions and we'll answer them in the Q&A session at the end of our section. The world of hospitality has been turned upside down in 2020. Some things have been gained, a lot has been lost. But however, there's one thing that has always been true for hospitality in the past, and it is still true about hospitality in the present, and it will remain true in the future. The restaurant industry and hospitality industry in general is often referred to as the industry of impressions. What exactly is this industry of impressions? Uliana, can you share with us, can you lead us into this topic a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that when we talk about impressions, the main thing for restaurants is to ask their target audience, why do people actually go to restaurants? And this is the main question in the survey conducted by RBC in 2020. And the results of the survey you can see on your screen. As you can see, they're not as obvious as they could be, because today it is not only about the good quality food. And the answers such as sense of holidays and diversity and the enjoying the company of your friends in a restaurant, it means that today restaurant visit it carries a lot more functions that it used to. And today the statistics shows that restaurant business should not only concentrate on making good quality food. And if we look deeper into detail, we can see that these response actually can be correlated with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because you need to sense holidays for self-actualization, and you need to treat yourself in order to feel accomplished, and you need your friends' company in order to feel loved. And all of these needs actually can be considered as the component parts of feeling of happiness. And such comparison gives a full understanding of the nature of these needs. And the satisfaction of all of these needs is the main priority for the restaurants today. And the main one of the main means of achieving guest happiness is the so-called impressions marketing, because you need to when working in a restaurant, you need to provide the practices that will mostly trigger the 5 main senses of human, and the impressions which you give to a customer are the main thing why we actually visit restaurants. Today, we not only visit them to eat, but to feel the impressions, to feel loyalty, trust, and love for the establishment. And these are the things that make us recommend the establishment to our friends and to come again. And this is what impressions marketing is all about. And Irina is about to tell us more about the practices.
Thank you. Thank you. Irina Boldasheva, our second-year student of hospitality, will deliver a presentation about a trend springing from this notion of impressions, namely impressions marketing, and how it is employed at hotels and restaurants. Irina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. After pandemic, the restaurant industry is going through hard times. Nowadays, restaurateurs face a dilemma when they cannot invest a lot of money, and at the same time, consumers are bored with the same type of mass products. One possible solution would be releasing a new product for a narrow audience. However, producing goods that would satisfy the needs of individual consumers is total rip-off. Much better decision would be focusing on mass products but taking into account the needs of individual consumers. This can be achieved by impressions marketing. So what is actually impressions marketing? You can see the definition on the screen. In general, definition impressions marketing is a set of activities aimed at forming a strong connection between the company and consumers. The very first task, the very first goal of impressions marketing, as Uliana said, is to appeal to feelings and emotions of customers. And its main task is to create an effective customer experience and to end with strong emotions of pride and joy in relation to the company. You can have a question, why impressions marketing is relevant for the restaurant business? The answer is quite simple. Impressions marketing is relevant for restaurant business because the industry itself is impression based. The next question could be, how can we use impressions marketing in the restaurant business? So first of all, we can increase consumer loyalty as well as stimulate positive word of mouth. There are a lot of examples of using impressions marketing in the restaurant business. Service improvements, social media development, interior design, impressions marketing can be applied everywhere. It depends only on imagination. But what about exact examples? A good illustration of the point is Moscow Lumberjack Bar. In this establishment, impressions marketing is used in the service. Bartenders are able not only to make a unique drink, but they also build an emotional connection to the guests. So they make guests feel special, important, and interesting. Another example is the restaurant 60. It is also located in Moscow and exactly on 62nd floor of Moscow city, offering a breathtaking view. So restaurateurs demonstrate the potential of impressions marketing in the interior. In addition, there are different dining rooms with several designs. So guests receive a new experience with each visit. To sum up, I can say that impressions marketing is a great and effective tool for the restaurant business because it puts impressions above the value of goods and services. And impressions and experience is something what modern consumers look for. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting. Another new concept that's popular today. I believe we have one question for Irina due to time restrictions. Let's have a question.
Irina, do you think impressions marketing can aim at making a profit?
As I said, impressions marketing is aimed at forming a strong connection between the consumer and the brand. And this leads to the fact that guests return to the establishment again and again. And it naturally brings profit to the restaurant. So yes, the ultimate goal of using impressions marketing is making a profit.
Mm-hmm. I had another question about how do you measure impressions marketing, but I don't know if we have still time for you to answer this.
Yes, I believe we have a minute to do so, yeah.
I can do it shortly. So actually, to measure the results of using impressions marketing, I used the same metrics as for standard marketing. For example, is considered the index rate of investments, efficiency of traffic sources, and etc.
Okay, Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to give the floor to our honorary expert, Elena Bosner, who would share with us her expertise in hospitality and your views on the topics discussed here today.
I have a question. Who would do I make the presentation? No. Oh, okay. Somebody else, yeah. Okay. I wanted to talk about this pandemic situation and the state of the industry a little bit from my personal experience, because I've been in the hotel industry for like almost 30 years. I started in 1990, so I call myself almost a dinosaur of the hotel industry. And I have personally lived through several crises, and they were different in spread and impact. And some were countrywide, some were international, some were economic, financial, or political. But one thing all of them had in common was that every single one of them affected hotel industry, and every time. For example, in 1998, I was part of the pre-opening team of the hotel, which is called Moscow Marriott Royal Aurora Hotel. And we were scheduled to open in November, but hit the crisis in November, and there were none of the financial transactions were possible for almost 2 months. So the hotel couldn't get the furniture, couldn't make the payments, so the suppliers didn't supply the furniture, equipment, etc., etc. So we had to postpone the opening of the hotel. But we did manage somehow to adapt to the situation, to change our opening strategy, and opened already in January, and in May, just 5 months after the opening, the hotel showed the highest ADR in Moscow market. And by the end of the year, we got our fair share and then increased our market share in further years. 2000, it was .com crisis. Russia was not affected too much by this crisis. It was primarily US crisis, but I was at that time the director of sales in the 3 Marriott hotels in Moscow. We had a cluster office, and judging by the brand, American market was extremely important for us. So we suffered again. And what we had to do, we had to work on replacement of American market with some other feeder markets. And we did this, and we again showed extremely good results. Next blow was world financial crisis, 2007 and 9. Russia started a little bit later than the rest of the world, and for Russian market it was a little bit shorter, but we all experienced drastic reductions in demand for travel. All companies worldwide and leisure tourists went into cost cutting and saving mode, and hotels again had to react. We, for example, tried to stimulate the demand, developing second-tier markets and looking for niches that we were not serving before. Like this, we invented 2 new segments. For example, we started to work with adoptive agencies and started to work with business aviation. That helped us to stay afloat and again show one of the best results in the market. In 2014, I was already working for Impulse Hospitality and had to help my clients to cope with this crisis, which was mainly political in nature. Russia was suddenly cut off from most developed international feeder markets. And yes, it was a tough one, but as a result, we saw development in internal tourism. New demand was formed, new offers were formed, and hotels started to explore regional markets. And of course, there were some successes, most two cities suffered the most because Moscow and St. Petersburg they were getting international clients and had to replace extremely big share of this business with some other kinds of business. But these two new markets also started to experience competition from other regional cities like Sochi, Ekaterinburg, Krasnodar. And as a result of this crisis, we have developed regional hotels, we have internal tourism, and the industry became stronger again. Can I move to the next slide, please? Yeah. And now we are living through another crisis. And this crisis is something that we have never seen before, because travel, though it was reduced, though a lot of companies and people, households were in saving mode, but we never experienced the situation that we couldn't travel. And last year we witnessed this kind of situation when planes didn't fly, borders were closed, and people stayed at home. And the results of this crisis were really devastating. We, if we look at some statistics, international arrivals went 87% down. Of course, it was not evenly distributed through the world, and the losses of regions depended, of course, on how strict the measures were, how many lockdowns they experienced, etc., etc. But it's clear that the whole world was affected by this crisis. If we can move to the next slide, I will show in progression how the first lockdown affected each of the regions. Yeah, you see that all of them dropped, but because, for example, mainland China had only one lockdown, it went up since then. And for example, Europe is experiencing many lockdowns and doesn't show so good results like Middle East and China, for example. In the next slide, you see that it was not only the decrease in demand, but it was for the first time that almost 30% of the hotels worldwide were closed. It was the first time in the history of hotel industry. In some European countries, every 2 of 3 hotels were closed. And already some analysis aftermath showed that hotels who stayed opened now outperforming the hotels which had to close. In the next slide, we'll see the occupancy rates by regions, and you can see that they went to almost 1-digit numbers in some of the regions at certain times. But hopefully the worst is behind, and the worst months, as you can see, were April and May. And this difficult situation also doesn't finish with last year. It sort of carries over to present year, 2021. The world shows only 34% occupancy in the hotels. It's extremely low. The next slide. But there is some hope, and this chart shows, the table shows the forward bookings, and as you can see, it was extremely bad in April, May, but if you look at the figures for 2021, March is not totally red. There are some regions that have positive occupancy and positive business on the books. Next slide. Another, can we go to the next slide first and then come back, because there's, yeah. On this slide, you show the top performers by cities worldwide first, and then some European cities. And I'm happy to say, and was actually happy to find out, that a lot of Russian cities are on this chart, because the restrictions in Russia are not so severe like in other European destinations. And it keeps the industry alive. It helps the industry to survive. Can we come back to the previous slide? Thank you very much. Another danger that the hotel industry will face is the closures of the hotel, because during the last year and now a lot of hotels accumulated a lot of debts, and Costa companies that sort of follows the tendencies in that market predicts that almost 60% of the hotels could be bankrupt in the near future. Okay, so that's briefly the state of the hotel industry. Of course, devastating. Like I said, we never experienced a crisis like this before, but every time, from my own experience, the industry, the hotels came out much, much stronger after the crisis than they were before the crisis. And I'm extremely hopeful that I do look into the future with optimism. I do believe that we, like before, become much, much stronger after this crisis. And one of my favorite phrases that I use quite a lot: future is very difficult to predict, and the best way to predict the future is to create it. And how can we all together create a better future for our industry, for hotel and restaurant industry, is only if we do it all together. You know, there was one of the research, and people during the quarantine were asked what are missing the most. And the majority of people say that travel is one of the things that they miss the most. And that makes me extremely hopeful, because we are not alone as an industry in this crisis. And we can make it happen if we join our efforts. It's up to us, every individual, every owner of the hotel, every general manager of every hotel, every employee and every guest. We have to make sure that we create a better future for us, for industry, and for the world. We have to show our best to make the worst times go by and become stronger. And the tendencies that we talk about, the sustainable future, the things that hotels use, the changing behavior of the consumer, give me a belief, strong belief, that we will manage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you have some questions, here are the contacts of our experts. You can contact and ask some questions if you have those. Thank you very much for these presentations. We've been tackling such a difficult, heavy issue today, and all of the presentations ended on a very hopeful, inspiring, and optimistic note. And I can say with greater confidence that the future belongs to these knowledgeable, inspiring, and proactive hospitality professionals that we have with us here today. Thank you everyone for coming. We are a bit out of time, so if you have any questions from the audience, you may contact us this session and we will answer you via email. Thank you all for coming. This is a conversation that is not over and that will need to continue in the following years. Let us say a big thank you to the speakers and a round of applause to the speakers. Thank you very much, and hopefully we will meet again in the following years.